Coming into these last living words before I take a break from specific living word volumes, I want to use, since these are like the later volumes, 28, 29, and 30, I want to show that when numbers are added up to from letter combinations, such as something really obvious like NN, which is 14 and 14 makes 28, that's space. 29 is space that is based and identified. And then 30 is not just space identified, it's all space and their own identification. That's 30, as in 3D. It's not the same thing as the word or the term 3D. It's 30. It's even of a more prime significance, but it's usually unknown. And before we go into these last couple of volumes before the break, I want to explain things about dimensions that most people don't think about in this way. Not that people don't understand, because when I say this, they'll make sense out of it. But most people would say, what's the zero dimension? Let's think of the word zero. When someone zeroes in on something, it doesn't mean that it's there. It's right there in space. It was already there. You just weren't noticing it. So when you zero in on something, it's not physical yet. It's the attention that goes there. It's putting notice on anything. So things can be anywhere. And when you zero in on it, you do that with thought. When you say one, you're adding to it. So we have A, the first letter. So when you zero in on something, the zero dimension, that's noticing. When you come into the first dimension, that's not just noticing, because it's already there. It's noticing itself as something separate. Now that noticing itself as something separate is not just there, it's moving on a straight plane. So it's there, noticing itself separate and noticing itself as well. From itself, it starts thinking. The third dimension is whatever you think about everything there. So it's the notice, the being, that being noticing itself, and then that being thinking, conceiving, the third dimension. Now the fourth dimension is a specific being out of all of that already said stuff, focusing on themselves and their own thoughts. So it's the place and the time, or what's happening in all things through that one thing, through their actions or thoughts. E, the expression. So now we'll go into an, the suffix en, or the prefix en, and then in, and then we'll do mind, minute, and wind. To start this one off with the three simple vowel combinations with N, A-N, E-N, and I-N. Of course, I can go into O-N and U-N, but I'm doing A, E, and I because they're in the once category. They're all the single-digit letters. So, A-N is to activate a notion. When you say man, it's a manifested, active notion. Man the battle stations. I'm a man. It's an action reference. Manifest, active notion. Man. Or just an is active notion. So when we say an other, we have an active notion that's other than the thing. See how that is? It's a plus here active notion. Than, other than. See? So it's like saying an other. It just means other than you. That's all. Plus here an, other, and other. So I guess I threw the word an other in there. Then when we say en, whether it's a suffix or a prefix, it's to express the notion of. When we say gold, and then we add an en, we're expressing the notion of something gold. When we say engage, we're talking about generating the active generated expression, but then we're saying express the notion of generating an active generated expression. I'm going to engage in that. So maybe the word engage isn't a good, example, but we'll use something else like enjoy. The expressed notion of joy. Intense, ongoing, vitally identified. Where I'm at right now, I have joy within me right now. Intense, ongoing, vitally identified. That's what joy means. So if you're going to enjoy, you're expressing the notion of joy. See how en is to express the notion, as an was to activate a notion. Now in, we're identifying a notion. So when we say, I'm in the house, the identified notion of you being where? The house. And since there aren't very many words that have in the beginning that I want to take the time to break down, like invite or initiate or anything like that, because vite or itiate aren't words of their own, so it's harder to make sense of them. It would. It's just you'd have to be able to follow what letters mean when they're broken down, used in a certain context. So we'll use IN involved in words. Like let's say the word bin. It's a base identified notion because you're going to put something in the bin. The identified notion in a base identified notion. That's where you put it in a bin. You could also put it on it. You could put it around it. But still, the bin is a base where you identify a notion or nature when it's a physical thing. So then when you say something like pin, it's the potential piece or placement identified notion. The pin itself is something you put in something to hold it in place. So that's why it's a pin. Now when we say pineal gland, potential identified notion expressing active ling, or your active base, which is where you're coming from in your brain, or from in your mind, or your connection to the mind is your pineal. Pineal. It has in the word. P, potential, piece or placement, identified notion, expressing the active ling, or as it lie, active base, your pineal. See how that word in is the identified notion. And then with all the letters around it in pineal, or the letters around it in pin or bin, identify when you use an I. So that's why I did AN is the active notion, EN is the expressive notion, and IN is the identified notion. So now we can move into these other words in this list, and you can make sense of them. And I'm not wrong. So I'm telling you this because this is true, and everything we've ever known, this applies to. So when you look into words and you think, I wonder if that's what it means. Now look at where the word is being used in its context, what dialect it originates from, and then do the word breakdown, and it'll always work. Before I move on to the next words I already mentioned in this video, I want to break down a word that I may have put in another video already, but since I have so many videos out and thousands of videos saved to still put out, I'm not sure if this is on one of the ones that has already been put out. Even if it is, this word helps explain the topic we're on right here with the AN, EN, and IN. The word is entice. If you know what entice means loosely, it means to use a lure, or to try to draw someone in, or to try to make something seem appealing to someone, to entice them. Now, when you break down that word, you can understand it better because you express a notion plus identified constant to itself expression. So whatever it is that you're trying to bring someone's interest to, you're expressing that notion plus identifying a constant to itself expression. So since you've already started with an expression, that notion plus the identified constant to itself or unseen expression is basically making that expression sound good to somebody, to entice them with it. Hey man, sound good? You want to try it out? I'm sure you'll like it. Ooh. And then they would say, that sounds enticing. Do you see how that word makes more sense? Because the word tice isn't a word. But when you add en, you're saying an expressed notion, plus identifying constant to itself expression. So you're trying to make that notion sound good. The reason I put that word in here was because we're going to move into the word dimension. Before we do the whole word dimension, realize that dim means something of small significance. It can be dim-witted. It could be a dim amount of light. You could say the future looks dim. That doesn't necessarily mean dark. It means it's a coming and going identified manifestation. It's very small, very faint. So when you add ention on it, instead of the word tension with a T and then ention, or the word mention with an M and then E-N-T-I-O-N instead of S-I-O-N, I know I've gone into why S-I-O-N and T-I-O-N are used and are always specific, but I'm not going to dive into that right now because we've already done that before. But one is a subject and one is a plus or a to any. So the word dimension, just like I was saying tension, is when you're tense, but you add I-O-N, identified ongoing notion, to being tense, okay? So when you say dimension, notice D, like I've said many times, is the primal or the more subtle form of T, because instead of T, it's D. It's like you're pulling your tongue off the top of your mouth, or you're pushing your tongue to the front of your teeth and going D. And when you're saying T, you're making more pressure, and it starts at the top instead of just being pushed there like D. It's T. There's a big difference. Yes, I over-enunciated that, but you know what I mean. I did that for a purpose. So the word dimension, dia, or to and from, identified, manifest, expressed, notion, subject, identified, ongoing notion. Having dimensions means some kind of separation, some degree of breadth, width, depth, even the magnitude of something, or something as small as the variation. You can say there are a whole bunch of dimensions to that building, or your mind is in another dimension. A lot of people have the idea that dimension means being far off in space, way out in the galaxy in the far reaches of the unknown. Yeah, sure, that's one idea of what dimensions are, but you have a dimension to your person. So subtle, so small. So that doesn't mean anything major, it's just a word. And so many people are lost, talking about all these different dimensions. Ooh, we've lost our ability to think about what matters, and we're getting caught in speculation. We're getting caught in ideas and fantasies and wants instead of what is important, what is actually necessary to survive. We've lost that such a long time ago because we're overconvenienced. And I don't want to take too long on any of these specific words because I'm trying to get through these lists fast. But I have way too much to say than to just keep breaking down letters because most people don't see what I'm trying to get at here. I'm not some average everyday guy. I happen to be an individual who knows the other side. I have experienced timelessness. I have experienced the universe in its entirety. I have experienced God. And I'm here with a message for humanity, for the world that I live in, to help it move forward. And I mean what I'm saying with every ounce of breath in my body, every ounce of life in me. I mean it. If you think I'm just saying this for my own good, try to understand I would not have given up everything in my life to try to help other people when I figured other people would want to know that they really don't die completely. You really just change. And if you never believed any of that stuff, I know it's going to take a long time or a lot of effort for somebody to convince you. Some people may not need all that. Some people may just hear it and go, oh my God, now you made sense of something I never thought I would understand. And thank you. And I've had people say that. But of course, the people who say that are usually afraid to do anything for themselves, and they still don't want to get hurt because they haven't had the experience. I have. I'm not book reading. I'm not studying. I'm remembering. I didn't sit down and try to figure any of this out. I have been through some shit in my life. I'm not just some pushover nice guy. Yes, on an everyday basis, I'm one of the kindest people you will meet. And I'm not just saying that. I've met a lot of people, and there's a lot of shitty people in the world, and they do it intentionally. I may offend people because I'm honest, not because I want to hurt their feelings or want to offend them. That should be apparent. When all I'm trying to do is get people to learn how to take care of themselves, to be healthy, to act like a good example for our children. Where in this world could anybody see something foul in that? And then if you listen and observe the stuff that I really do in my everyday life, how much I do without because everyone else is doing with way too much, you would see that I'm not just saying this. I mean it. I know it's hard for people to believe that there really is a God and that there really is a Christ energy. Now, if you happen to be somebody who goes to church or has some kind of religion or even has looked into backgrounds and knows that the universe is conscious, then why is it so damn hard for you to hear somebody pouring their heart out, telling you the truth? And if you really listen, you can see that I've experienced a lot of shit. And I'm not trying to compare myself with anybody. That's already been done through living experience. This isn't a comparison. It's just what I have been through and what others have not. Yes, others have been through something. Others have been through a lot. But when I say that I remember many, many, many deaths, uncountable amounts, that's not fascinating to me. It happens to be true, and it's not fun. On top of it all, if you just think to yourself, how many experiences have you had in your life that were just a blast? They were so great. And how much do you really remember of them now? I have billions of great, pleasureful experiences, but they come and they go on a whim. Bad times seem to stay because they have a lasting effect on our emotions.
And the only way we can move forward properly is if we stop intentionally harming ourselves and others. That should not be that hard to understand. Either way, I don't want to go spieling for a long time, so I'll move on in this list.
Since we did dimension, we might as well do time. I know I've mentioned time before, and it's so simple, because time is made up. It is the ultimate part of what we call the illusion. Because if we didn't keep track of stuff, how would we remember anything? We got to give it a date, a time, place, a number, a value, all that kind of stuff. That's all stuff we place on it. Dimension has nothing to do with time. Time is one of the dimensions. It's literally 20, T, identified, manifest, expression. It doesn't just mean 1 second, 2 second, 3 second, 4 second, or minutes and hours, or days, weeks, months, and years. You can just say, I had a good time. Did that have to be some value of seconds and minutes? No. Did it have to be anything specific? No. You could say, I hope you enjoy the time you have. It's going to be a hard time today. Wow, I've had so many times in my life that have passed, and so many times yet to come. Time is a word. It's an idea. We don't have to keep track of everything. We just have. And since we have, we don't know how much we're missing by focusing on so little. Anyway, time is plus identified, manifest, expression. That's all time means. You can enjoy life. You don't have to keep time. But it's not like we'll ever stop doing that. It's just taking things so personally and trying so hard to be on the dot and be punctual ruins a lot of things. Yes, it's good. If you make plans, follow through. But no one should be obligated to a routine schedule. We are not cosmic bodies like suns and planets and stars. We don't have to go around in the same kind of cycle. We are parts of the universe, and we are the universe in part. So we have so much of an ability to improve this world. But instead, we're following routines because we follow entities that we've made up stories about that follow patterns of the cosmos. That's all. Every religion, every backstory is something based off of the solar deities. The sun, the moon, the stars. That's it. All of it. The zodiac, all the way to Christmas. All of it. Every religion, everything. Oh, what a time we've had. Once upon a time. Are we coming to the end time? I think the end time has already passed. But we're going to keep time so we can remember the time it all ended. See how silly all that sounds? But they're words. I'm not going to belabor this one. I hope taking the time to do the word time helps you understand a little better. And we can start making our time more valuable by actually doing things that we enjoy in our lives instead of being on a schedule. So since we've done dimension and time, now we'll go into parts of time because this is all mind. Plenty of people have said that. This is all mind. And then when you look into scriptures and any kind of writings, when they say man, they're talking about an energetic body of mind, of spirit, of energy, that kind of thing. But when we talk about mind, you're the first teen letter, the 13th letter, coming into tense, in the teens, not just like J, K, and L, which are 10, 11, and 12. That's 10, which what's the tense. 11 is elevating, but even, eleven. And then you say 12 is 2, elevated. And then if you want that constant to itself, the birth of the A and B in tense, not just the actively active kinetic, or the active base as it lie or ling, then we move into the actively conceived, or the actively unseen, or the actively constant to itself, M, the manifestation. So when you have manifestation, or the active constant to itself, identified notion to and from. You see, the word mind will never be something that you look at unless we have a depiction of it. So the mind is literally a manifested or actively unseen concept, identified notion to and from. The mind, what you take from the air or what you take from thought. Mind. Pretty damn simple. And I know I've said this before, but the reason I'm doing that is because when we say stuff like mini, miniature, minute, which is coming up next. Those things mean to manifest an identified notion. So when we have the word minute, manifest or actively constant to itself or unseen, identified notion as a unit plus expression. So T is the to any sign, and then we say expression, because we have to identify something in time. Do you notice that the word time is in the word minute, just scrambled? And the word time is the actual word emit, backwards. Because when something is emitted, it's what's put out. When you keep time, you're keeping track of what has been put out. See? When we look at words, they do the forward-backward thing in many occasions, depending on how it's used in context. That's where, if people were talking honestly, you'd see that what I'm teaching is exactly true. The problem is, so many people are either lying or they're telling a story that they heard from somebody else that happens to be wrong. So, that's why I have to do this, and that's why I do it the way I do it. It does get frustrating at times, and I do apologize when I get angry, but I'm a real living being, and I give a shit. You got to expect that from somebody who actually cares. I'm not just going to be stoic, just be monotone, because it doesn't matter to me. I'm a cosmic being, and we live forever, so we could all perish. We could, and we do, so it's no big deal. But right now, let's do the best we can while we're here. You know? Hey, that sounds like a great idea to me. And since we did minute, we can't leave out second. When we say S-E-C-O-N-D, think of the word can't, C-A-N apostrophe T. Now turn C-A-N into C-O-N, turn the apostrophe T into something much less tense, because T is to any and D is just dia, and say C as an outward expression, because when you S-E-E, that's expressed upon itself. Just like I said, every double letter means that. But when you say S-E, you're subjecting an expression of an unseen, ongoing notion, dia, to and from. See, can't, or see, couldn't, I couldn't see it. Second, you are the one, we are the one. And we're keeping time so that we can remember, I get it, but the word second means something you can't see. And it's got a pace set to it, because we set the pace, as in a tap, 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 tap. Like, why? Because this is universal, and we are living in a pattern, and a pattern has to have a rhythm, and the rhythm is the heart. The heart is the earth, and the earth lives off the sun, and on and on and on. We're still all one. Now, I don't want to play around with making it sound too fun, I guess, but to me, this is fun. I love you. You are me, and there's no separation other than you thinking that. And even when we're around each other, I will act this same way, because I love you. What am I supposed to do? You want me to stop loving you because you don't love me? Or you don't even know me? That's fine. You do know me. I'm inside you. And I'm all around. Not to sound funny, but either way, we'll move on. So we have a few words with IN. We'll do integer, integrate, and integrity. If you know what an integer is, that basically means a whole number, something that's not a decimal or a fraction. So you have an integer, any whole number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Any whole number is an integer. So to break it down, thinking of the idea of a number, we're saying an integer, we're identifying a notion plus expressed, generated in grouped, expressed reference. So if we have a notion plus we express a generated in grouped, expressed reference, we have to do what? We give it a digit or some kind of figure, which we call a number. It's num as an expressed reference. It's just something we give as a name for a unit, manifested base expressed reference. I hope you followed that, because that's what an integer is when you're talking about a number. It's something that is whole, okay? So to move on with integrate, you're saying the identified notion plus expression along with the word grate. When you generate a reference active plus expression, like when you grate cheese, or when you have something that is grated, G-R-A-T-E-D, that's something that is that same thing being generated and grouped, as in broken into pieces, reference active plus expression. Grate, severed and even, reference active plus expression. That's what the seventh letter G. So when you integrate something together with it, you want to bring it in with that grate, that thing, that generated reference active plus expression. You say identified notion plus express, generated in grouped reference active plus express. You're bringing it in with it. Integrate. complete. If you have integrity, you will do the right thing, whether somebody's there witnessing it or not. You're not going to need someone there to do the right thing because you act out of integrity. Identified notion plus expressed, generated, and grouped reference identified plus vitally identified. See how many identified notion there is? Identified notion plus expressed, generated, and grouped reference identified plus vitally identified. I know it's always the same thing and it sounds robotic. I'm very aware that that's the case, but I can't do anything about the fact that that's how it does work. That's what things mean every single time. That's why I can't do it differently or I'd be misleading you. And whether or not the rest of the world is misleading you, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do everything I can to help this world turn itself around so we can get back on track, or so we can just get on a right track. That is my duty to you and to myself. Because without having a world of harmony or a world that actually understands communication, not just how we do it in the world right now, because it's failing, we're never going to move anywhere. We're never going to move forward with something better. It's just going to be a bunch of hoopla and a bunch of noise until we actually make this something we put into action. We'll finish this episode by coming full circle and by doing the word begin and then an ending, because that way we have A-N, E-N, and I-N being used right in order. So in order for something to begin, it has to be identified. Apparently there's already activity, but we just don't say began because that's the past tense. It has to be identified first. In order for something to be known, there has to be an identity. So we start off, since numbers and letters just represent things in space, it's not that crucial that we start with an A, as in saying the word begin has to have began first. See, began is talking about something that will begin or something that has begun in past tense, just as the way begun is, because that's to any one. And then when you say just A, that's one. Begin is base expressed, generated, and grouped, identified notion. So in order for the base expressed, generated, and grouped thing to be even known, it has to be identified as a notion. When we say began, it's active already, so that it had to already have started when we say began. Therefore, that's past tense. Now, when we say an ending, we use an because we're activating a notion, and since it starts with the vowel, we say an ending. And then we have activated notion, now space, expressed notion to and from, identified notion, generated and grouped. So for the idea of an end, the expressed notion, dia, to and from, now we identify that as a notion generated and grouped. So therefore, it is called an ending when you come to an end. And I can't think of a better note to leave off on this. I didn't want to leave anything unexplained or out in the open, but that's just going to have to happen because there's infinite things to say about how the universe works. And I'm going to keep doing it for the rest of this lifetime. So until next time, peace and God bless.